that you love about them, there's the stuff that you need to compromise on, and there's the stuff that you just need to manage. You know, the stuff that, and there's, you know, one likes to drink, one doesn't like to drink. You know, one likes a hot bedroom, one doesn't like a hot bedroom. One's more sociable than the other. You just manage. There's a little pile of stuff that you just manage. And I think with Mars and I, the small little part that was very tricky for us, that you just think, we'll sort it out. You know, I'm optimistic. I'll learn to manage this. You know, we'll just muddle our way through. That took over the whole relationship. And it was nothing particular, it wasn't anything exciting. It was just probably the manifestations of both of our traumatic childhoods. So I realised that what I thought the theme was explaining something that no one explained to me. So when you're going through a relationship breakdown like that, it just seems, so how do I do this? And when I remember at the time these little kids and suffering major depression, and it was the start of the financial, what was that great financial meltdown? What was it?
GFC.
The GFC, yeah, that meltdown. I was at the age and things were just kind of a bit nutty there, and there was a whole lot of politics going on. And there was just no stability whatsoever in any way, shape or form. And I actually don't even know how people go through breakups and split-ups and breakthroughs in their relationship, because it's so frightening. I totally understand why people stay, because you just don't know, even if it's 99% bad, you don't know if when you leave it's going to be 100% bad. It's so tough. And I'd be in the middle of it and in such a terrible state. I've only been thin twice in my life. I've never dieted, I've never wanted to be thin, and it just didn't suit me whatsoever. One was when I had cancer, one was when I was going through this depression. But people would, so weird how people are with bodies, they would cross the street to tell me how great I looked. And they go, oh my God, what are you doing? And I said, I'm breaking up with Mars and I'm suffering the worst depression I've ever had in my life. So I would see these people and say, oh, Mars and I are breaking up. And they go, oh yeah, oh, Ted and I broke up. There we go there. G'day Ted, you're going to come over and, you know, do the garden. And I'm just like, how do you get from being together to going through this exhausting, emotionally horrific decoupling and detonating, that's what it felt like, to that? No one showed me the stitching. You would just hear, you'd often hear, when you think about no-fault divorce, it's just so bizarre. There was one time they had to be at fault. Is not being happy and just a relationship running its natural course, is that not enough? So that's what I thought the relationship was. I thought the book was about that. I thought that the book was about explaining how people get into relationships, how they change, when it's time to leave, and what informs all of those motivations to couple, to have children, to choose a particular person, and how people change and when it's time to leave. That's what I thought it was about. So I gave my publishers the manuscript just before COVID started, and I don't get advances and I don't get contracts beforehand. I just write my book and then I literally just attach it to an email and I just write, please consider. Occasionally I'm a bit more theatrical. I print the whole thing out and put a rubber band around it and write it to the publishers and just leave it on the desk with please consider. But printers being printers, they never work. Wouldn't that be a great thing to, you'd make a lot of money if you could create and manufacture a printer that actually worked. So that's right, so I gave it to them in March and 2020, I think it was. And the idea that is that it would come out the following March. But people being people, my editor, you know, a whole lot of the wheels in her life fell off and COVID had really stuck them. She was managing 10 people. There was stuff going on with every, you know, father, partner, son, everything, and health issues herself. And so she got to this point and said at the start of 2021, probably March, it was going to be March and then pushed it to July. I think it was COVID, I didn't know what it was. And she messaged me and said, I'm not going to get finished in time. And and she said, I just waking up a cold sweat. I talked to everybody at work and they just said, no, tell Deb, she's not going to care, just, let's just move to March next year. And she said every fibre of my being said that you'll give us a bit of time, I'm reading up this book. So, you know, what do you think? And I, of course, wrote back and said, people are more important than books. You know, how can I help? Don't worry about it. March next year is fine. And sent the email and then subsequently burst into tears. And the reason that I knew that there's no manifesto, there's no universe, there's no it was meant to be. But I always know that there's advantages and disadvantages to timing and any kind of situation. So I was cool with it, cool-ish. The reason I was upset was because the year before had been COVID. And I don't know whether you know, but I've run these Gunners Writer masterclasses and Gunners retreats. Please come along. There's pamphlets next to the books if you're interested, which I absolutely love. And I had set up this whole year of like 30 events, and you know that means you book in with the venues, you create this event on a booking platform, you put it onto your website, you get the graphics, you put it onto social media, and I had to, I think I did 5 of those events, and I had to postpone, then cancel and dismantle all of those events, and it was an absolute heartbreak. It was incredibly expensive, and all of the artists, you know, had the same kind of situation. So in 2021, my idea was, I'm only going to commit to 3 retreats, and hopefully 2 will go ahead, no other gunners, and everything else online. And I had this book coming out, so I thought, look, worst case scenario is that I'd have to launch the book on Zoom. So I kept making a little joke to myself that I bought the dress for the launch, but I hadn't bought the shoes because it's on Zoom and I went around the downwards. So this one thing that I just thought was so sure. Do you remember at the start of COVID where we just things just kept dropping off, things that you were so used to doing certain things on your birthday or going for certain holidays at certain times of the year and going to the coffee shop and going to, I don't know whether it's Moomba or the Reservoir Festival, whatever, all of these things, the comedy festival, I mean all of these things just like gone. So I had a bit of a pity party for about 2 hours and then I was gone. So I was like, okay, it's coming out next year. And I knew that there'd be benefits to it that I couldn't see then. So by the time we got to the start of this year, and the book was, the launch was late March, by the time we got to that point of the year when we needed to do the last edit and I had to go to press. So it was January, I was down at Coburg Pool, and they sent a message through, and they sent me the manuscript, the last edit of it, and I said, I just can't read it. I said to my editor, I just can't read it. I said, I'm frightened it's not going to be as good as I want it to be, and I'm not going to know how to fix it. And she said, I totally get that. I'll get a few people to read it in here, publicists and people who work in there, and see what they think. And I thought it was great. There was a couple of tiny things about, oh, Anthony comes back, that wasn't clear, that was that same person. Easy fixes. But the thing that a couple of people said was it ended abruptly. And they said, why don't you put the love party in at the end? So, I am vehemently anti-marriage, and I have never married. And I'm always interested in people going, oh, we just want to have the party. And I go, well, why don't you just have the party? And they can never, no one can ever explain why they got married. And no one can ever explain why they have children. The only explanation to getting married still often doesn't stock up, which is, oh, just to get the passport or whatever. But so many of these situations I've found that people will say, oh, I just got married for the passport, and then you've got other people going, hang on, we're in the same situation with the same nationalities, and we got the passport through just de facto. But they never look further from it. People make decisions emotionally and they back emotionally. People want to get married for whatever crazy reason. So Anthony and I had this, so Anthony's my partner, and he and I had this thing we called a love party. So it was basically, it was like a wedding, but no God, no government. I wore a veil. It was just wild. There's pictures on my website. It was just unbelievable. It was in the park. There was 120 people. We had a certificate. We had flower girls. We had this. It was amazing. It was just like a wedding. well, it was a wed, but it was not a marriage. And, you know, better dead than wed. And so they said, how about we finish it with that? And I thought, no, it just ties it up in a bow. I don't like it at all. It's too neat, and it's not right. So, you know how I said I knew there'd be advantages to this, and there's nothing ooky speaking about this. My mum died May last year. So I remember getting this email as I was down at Coburg Pool, and Kirsty saying, ends a bit abruptly, needs a bit more, why don't you write something about love party? And I just went, love party's not it, I don't know what it is, but let me have a think. And then about 5 minutes later, I messaged back and I said, I've got an idea. I do not know if I'm a good enough writer to write this, but can you give me a week? And can I just have a week to see if this thing that I'm thinking of works? She said, fine. So I ended up being able to write this final chapter, and as I'm telling you about this, I'm getting goosies. I wrote this, the final chapter is about the death of my mother, and I think that it made the book 10 times better, and it took me up another level as a writer, and possibly as a thinker too. So the book turned from the idea of showing the stitching of the breakdown in a long-term relationship. And, you know, there's cultural, there's gender stuff, there's, you know, all of the historical baggage that we bring, and I think we try to make sense of, and that's why we have children and we fall into relationships with certain people. And so then I wrote the final chapter, and I sent it to Kirsty, and she said, this is the best, this is my editor, the best piece of the death of someone close that I've ever read, the best account, I think that's the word. And I knew it was good, and I knew that it worked, and I was very pleased, because I want the, you know, this is my 10th book. It's like my 10th kid. Like, no one really cares. You know, it's like when you write a book and you publish a book for the first time, it doesn't matter how much other writing you've done elsewhere. As soon as you've written a book, it's like, oh, you've written a book. When you've written 10, no one does it. It's just like, oh, there's another one. Like, who cares? But that's not how I see it. I just try to write the best book that I can write for the reader and for the story. That's what my main motivation is. It's my only motivation. I, like everybody here, have been the extraordinary beneficiary of art and thought and enthusiasm and application. I mean, look at everything around us, not just the books, but the architecture, the beautiful clothes that you're wearing, the music I'll probably listen to on the way home in the car. Just an amazing beneficiary of art. And so I love to be on the other side of that equation and that transaction where I'm bringing something. It doesn't feel, it feels like a very level playing field. It's like I'm always going to other people's places to eat, and I love them coming to mine every now and then, and I'm putting the food on. So, yes, I wrote this last chapter, made the book so much better, and it made me see it through another lens, what the book was and what the experience was. My feeling was, after that chapter was emerged from it, it wasn't bolted on. Sometimes you'd think they go, oh, you need something else, and then you kind of put something on that didn't seem to match, like a lean-to on the back of a house. But it was like there was a holding space waiting for that part of the story. So the book is basically about splitting up. And we are constantly splitting up with parts of ourselves and ways that we live. Whether it's suddenly we're not eating meat, suddenly our hair is a different colour, suddenly we're living somewhere else, we've got a different job, we are atheist or suddenly religious or no longer running and now into yoga. You know, there's friends that we don't see anymore, there's new friends that we're making. We are constantly splitting up with parts of ourselves. It's an ongoing process, and it really needs to be normalised to move away from things that no longer serve us. So there's something called sunk costs, and I think, so the sunk cost is the idea of the costs that you put into a project or a belief, and people are so reluctant to, it's like, imagine if you've had private health insurance. I've never had private health insurance, but I imagine this is what it's like. It's just like, this is a total rip-off, and I don't have the money, but I don't want to get at it now just in case. religion is a perfect example. It's just like, this is crazy, it makes no sense, it's totally oppressed me, but if I die, you know, like I'm 70 now, and like, why would I, like if I die now, and maybe there is some extraterrestrial, what did I say? That was much better. Extraterrestrial, but I made it was funny, it was extraterrestrial kind of supreme power who decides whether you've been good enough and there's a kind of amazing paradise for you. So it's the whole sunk cost there. I want us to encourage ourselves and others to split up with parts of ourselves more. And I'm not just talking about relationships with romantic partners, and I'm not just talking about changing a job, and I'm not just talking about, you know, selling a house and moving somewhere else. I'm talking about beliefs that no longer serve us, and I'm talking about relationships with blood relatives that no longer serve us. I don't know why people continue to stay in these toxic, abusive, and just sometimes, you know, boring or dysfunctional relationships that they would never put up with in any part of their lives. Just like, oh, my brother shits me. Just like, why do you have contact with them? You know, you see people who are shattered after spending time with, you know, members of family. It's just like, why do you keep doing this? There's just no way known that you would hang on to this if this was a friendship or a business relationship. No way. Why do you still stay with? We need to normalise that. I think that COVID's been quite good for that. I think that, you know, the Easter gatherings and the Christmas gatherings and the birthday gatherings and the Mother's Day, Father's Day stuff, that people have been able to stand back from those things and ask themselves, do we want to continue doing this the way that we've always done it? Christmas is a perfect example. So Mum died last year, and as soon as she, you know, on her deathbed, she said, I just want you kids to be happy. And I just went, good, I'm not doing Christmas ever again. I am a conscientious objector of Christmas now and forever. There's just this big web of you know, expectation and obligation that makes no sense whatsoever. I look back on Christmases of my past, and growing up really poor, it's the only time that you got a present or there was some yummy food. There was benefits to it. The sunk costs of it, I didn't want to give up. There was some happy moments in Christmas, at Christmas, that just didn't occur any other time. But it took me to get much older to be able to disconnect from it entirely. If I had my time again, I don't have many regrets. If I had my time again, I wouldn't do Christmas with my kids. I wouldn't do Father Christmas. I wouldn't do any of that bullshit. It felt so deceptive to be, you go, ooh, creating this magical world of bullshit. You know, it really is not the way that I've ever rolled with my kids. I hated the buying presents, plastic stuff that they wanted, that I knew, you know, kids, but the look on the kids' faces is like, how about you just love them? How about you take them to the park? How about you take, like, if that is what gets, if bullshit and plastic toys is what gets their eyes to light up, we're doing something very wrong, don't you think? So that was fantastic being able to walk away from that, and I really, really regret doing it with the kids. Really regret doing it with the kids. And I've said to them, so, you know, they're now big, and I said, look, going to not really be doing much, and if you guys have kids, we will then sit down and work out what that's going to look like. But basically, Christmas Day is just turning back feminism 150 years. Because you take women's labour out of that, you got nothing. You know, you go, oh no, but my dad carves the ham. It's just like, what about all of the other stuff? Like, I would start having just these jolts of panic thinking about Christmas at this time of year, going, oh, you know, like it's coming. It was such a horrible time. It reminded me of all of this stuff that didn't make sense. It reminded me of my depressed mother, of the the expectation that she felt, the excitement, you know, because they wanted us to buy into this it's this exciting time, but it was so unmanageable for my mum with no money, suffering depression. She was, you know, autistic. She self-identified later in her life. It was so hard for her. It was just, she was just doing all of this stuff that she was told to do with no help and no support and no money. Like, it was just horrible. We're much better than that. So yeah, that was one of the great takeaways. Mum just kept saying, I just want your kids to be happy. And I think that most people have always looked at me in the way that I've lived my life and gone, well, you know, you've got nothing to learn in that area. It's just like, yeah, I have. So every now and then when I do have to make a decision about something, I just go, what would make you happy? Do that. So that is my little book. So the reason it's called True North is because basically this book is looking at, so True North is about finding your way with your compass, finding out, you know, who you are and which way to go. But it's also about growing up in the north, because I grew up in Reservoir and I live on the edge of Coburg and Brunswick now, and I bought a house there when I was 26, and that's where I still live. It's where my kids were raised and born, and so that's why the name is True North. I'm loving how it's landing. It's very strange. I'm not interested in reviews or, you know, new editions or anything like that. There's been quite a bit of film interest, which has surprised me, about buying film rights from America of all places. Just like I didn't think it translated like that. But what means everything to me is the messages that I'm getting, and no one has to message me. These are just coming from the blue. People just saying, oh, I just loved your book, I couldn't put it down. I felt seen and held, and it helped me understand more about myself, or, you know, and that amazing communion of the reader and the writer, that's all you can ask for. There's plenty of books that have read, you know, had wonderful reviews and, you know, had millions of copies, and they don't land in people's hearts. You know, my book, I want people to get to the end of it and feel kind of more compassionate to themselves and the people around them, so that they kind of understand things. And I hope, and I know that people probably, it's helped them understand a bit more about what happened to them. I mean, I remember when we were splitting up, I think Dawn was about 11, the boys were about, I don't know, 6 or 7 little ones. And I remember being at the school, and every now and then, you know, doing pick-up, there'd be just, it would always be Mum, it was never Dad. Mum, and there was plenty of dads that would go down to school, but they weren't asking me this question. They'd come up, I often didn't know them very well, but they knew that we were going through a breakup, and they would basically say to me, can I just ask you a question? And I said, yeah, sure. And they said, how do you know when it's bad enough to leave? Because it's really hard weighing that up. And I remember, and I said, you know, now I would say, I got to a point where I decided that living in public housing and never having a relationship again, and never having a job again or earning any money again, was a much better example to my children than the relationship that I was in. Because the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And if you stay in those relationships, and I'm not just talking about romantic partners, I'm talking about siblings, parents, children. If you stay in that relationship, that is showing everybody that you say this is good enough. And it's not. Yeah. So they would say, you know, how do you know when it's bad enough to leave? And I would say, when you start wishing they died. And it's not that you want them dead, it just is so you don't have to be the bad guy and make that decision. It's just like, oh, well, it's done. You know, they're dead, so we don't have any other choice. Fantasising that they'll die, and also not wanting to go on holidays with them, because getting away from it's great to have separate holidays and do all that, but if the idea of getting away from it all is basically your partner in your relationship, that's time to rethink. They don't make it easy to split up. They do not. They do not make it easy at all. And I also heard from women who've married and changed their surnames, or married into a religious situation or a cultural situation. It's even harder. You know, it's very easy to change your surname. when you marry, and it's almost entirely women. You try changing it back, super hard, very hard. They don't make it easy. And they should. When people break up, there should be a hub that you can go to. There should be financial services. We should be encouraging people to split up. I hope my book makes people split up. I do, because you don't split up if a relationship is good. If that book pushes people or encourages people to split up, that tells me very strongly that relationship has run its natural course. So, we have to be out of here in a little bit over half an hour, and I've got books to sell, and I've got a little touch and pay. Over there I've got True North. I've also got one copy of my book on writing called Use Your Words, one copy of a book, 2 copies of a book I wrote called Mental. I wrote with a psychiatrist called Steve Allen, who was my first governor, so we wrote a Dummer's Guide to Mental Health, which has gone into second print, and also there's a UK version, and there's a Chinese version. So we are big in China. So this book's been bought and is translated, which is just makes me laugh a lot. And there's also copies of my book, The Happiness Show, which is a fictional book, but it's clearly a thinly veiled memoir. And that's one of those kind of great beach reads. So, thank you for coming, but I'd really love to take some questions on anything, writing process, offending people, let her rip. And I'm not leaving until I get at least 5 questions. And I can be a little bit scary, a bit like a very